Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
We used to say our name, so my name is Paul.
I have the privilege of introducing my friend Dennis, Howard, Mike, Scott, George, Paul, Flint, Rob, Carl. My name is Jim, Peter, Joaquin, Jack, Ed, Paul, Peter, David, Jim, Bob, Steve, Lee.
Okay. And we have a speaker today, and her name is Blanche Hartman, and she's a former co-abbess at San Francisco Center, and she is a dharma heir of Mel Weitsman, and has been practicing since 1969. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello to all of you. It's really nice to be back here at Gay Buddhist Fellowship. I have in mind to speak about gratitude today, and I wanted to say, and I was thinking to say something about one of the great gifts of Zen practice for me has been the experience of gratitude. And then I thought, be careful. Don't talk about Zazen as if there's something to get. You know, all of our teachers have emphasized that we sit Zazen just to sit Zazen, not to get anything. One of the reasons, I think, is if you think of it as you need to get something, it seems like something is missing right now. And the first time I ever heard Suzuki Roshi speak on the Dharma, he said, "You're perfect just as you are." And I thought, oh, he doesn't know me. Not me. But over the years, he would say many things pointing in this direction. There's nothing missing. You're complete as you are. You have everything you need. Just to be alive is enough. He kept pointing in this direction. And so I think it's very important to begin with saying, although, in fact, this practice has been a very rich experience for me, I don't sit in order to gain something. This sitting, Suzuki Roshi used to say again and again, no gaining idea. He would also say things like, Zen is about making your best effort on each moment, forever. Or there's always room for improvement. But this fundamental teaching that there's nothing wrong with you right now, I think is very important. Somehow, many of us grow up thinking there's something wrong with us. There's a teacher here in California, Sherry Hubbard, who wrote a book called "No Matter What You've Been Taught to Believe, There's Nothing Wrong with You." And I gave that to my daughter, and she has distributed it to dozens of friends. It's been a very important book in her life. And getting to realize that there was nothing wrong with me has been a very important aspect of growing up. And some of that came through practice and through the teaching of Suzuki Roshi and other teachers. Some of it came actually through psychotherapy as well. easy for us to get the notion that there's something wrong with us. And it's so hard to let go of that notion and just appreciate this one as it is, as a gift, as a great gift. I didn't actually get it, that this life was a gift, until I had a heart attack a number of years ago. And as I was leaving the hospital, walking home, I thought, wow, I'm alive. I could be dead. Wow, the rest of my life is just a gift. And I thought, gee, I guess it always has been. It's too bad I didn't notice that before. So it's, this is one of the moments in practice at which gratitude has been an extremely important realization for me. But years ago, 1980s, I think, there was a Tibetan teacher, Taratupa Rinpoche, who was teaching at Green Gulch Farm, where I then lived. And he was giving us a traditional Tibetan teaching. There are these traditional meditations for cultivating gratitude in the Tibetan tradition. I don't know how many of you practice in the Tibetan tradition. One of them is the teaching that everything we have in our life, everything without exception, comes to us through the kindness of others. And it directs you to meditate on anything that you think is yours and think about how it came to you. Even the food we eat, or the clothes we wear, or the roof over our head, the necessities of life come to us through the kindness and the labor of others. And in our tradition, we begin our formal meals with the chant, "Innumerable labors brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us." Or in more modern translation, which I like this about, we reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. But this Tibetan teaching focuses on everything that we have comes through the kindness of others. And through our own actions in our life, we offer gifts to others all the time. We offer the product of our effort to share with others continually, so that this life we have is a continual flow of giving and receiving, always. I love the way we eat our formal meals during meditation retreats, during sessions, where we all eat in the meditation hall. We lay out some bowls, and servers come and serve us, and we bow to each other all the time. And it's just a whole kind of ceremony of offering and receiving, which sort of highlights this aspect of our life. But my first real experience of gratitude in practice came when I was preparing to enter the monastery at Tassajara. And in the Japanese tradition, in preparing to enter a monastery, you go and you sit. At Tassajara, we sit for 5 days. And you go to the zendo with everyone in the morning, and then after breakfast, when they leave, you go back to the zendo. You take a short break, and you go back to the zendo, and you sit. And everybody comes and joins you for noon service and lunch, and then they leave, and you go back to the zendo, and you continue to sit. Everybody comes to join you for evening service, and evening zazen and service and dinner, and then you go back to the zendo and sit. So you're sitting all day, and most of us have not sat that much, and it's very difficult. And in September, when the fall practice so physically it's very demanding. But in the midst of this, about the fourth day, I mean, at some point you have to give up complaining in your mind because you can't stand it. About the fourth day, I began being aware of the sounds of other people, friends of mine actually, because I'd gone down there for short times as a guest student in the summer, working very hard. And then I began to realize, somebody was working in the kitchen to prepare these meals, and somebody was serving them. And began to feel grateful to all of these people who were working so that I could sit. I had wanted to go there for a long time before I was actually able to go. I had teenagers at home still when I first began to practice, and I couldn't just quit my job and go. So when I finally got there, I was really glad to be there. So it seemed like everybody was doing all this work so that I could sit. And then I thought about, and Suzuki Roshi came here to America to teach so that I could sit. And then somehow I was just feeling this upwelling of gratitude. Somehow it just went rushing back through the whole lineage like falling dominoes. Everyone from Suzuki Roshi all the way back to the Buddha, if any one of them hadn't kept this practice alive, I wouldn't have the opportunity to sit today. So my experience, finally, of Tangaryo, instead of being miserable and tired of the flies and hot and sticky and knees hurting, my actual final experience of Tangaryo was this overwhelming gratitude for everyone over all of the generations who had made it possible for me to practice the Buddha Dharma. And that has been one of the greatest gifts of practice. So this Tibetan practice of really meditating on the fact that one of the meditations is on the fact that, well, since all of us have had innumerable rebirths, everyone, all beings have been your mother in some life, and you've been the mother of everyone else in some life. So we should have gratitude to everyone as we do to the mother of this life. And when he said that in Green Lodge in 1984, there was this kind of uncomfortable giggling. He looked truly perplexed. And I began to feel overwhelming embarrassment for our whole culture, because for him, the mother of this life was the obvious object of gratitude, because after all, where did our life come from? We owe this life to the mother of this life. But no, in our culture, since Freud, the mother of this life is the source of all of our problems. And so it was really embarrassing for me to realize that somehow we have forgotten gratitude. And instead of appreciating the source of our life, we find fault with whatever it is that we didn't get that we wanted when we were young. And of course, we didn't get all that we wanted when we were young. Our parents didn't give us unconditional love, which every child should have. Because guess what? Their parents didn't give it to them. And they didn't do it because they didn't know how, because their parents didn't give it to them. I said to my therapist at one point, well, if every child deserves unconditional love, why don't we get it? She said, well, it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Even they didn't get unconditional love. But for me, this gift of gratitude has been a great delight, and so I wish it for all my friends. The Buddha, in his first turning of the wheel of tree. First thing he said was, friends, there is dukkha. Dukkha is usually translated as suffering. A more precise translation, I think, is unsatisfactoriness. Friends, there's unsatisfactoriness, there's dissatisfaction. Well, the opposite of dissatisfaction is gratitude. So when we cultivate gratitude, there's a great deal of alleviation of dukkha. I want to read a poem that I was reminded of a day or two ago, and I remembered how much I appreciate it. It's a Mary Oliver poem called Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. This one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. How to fall down into the grass. How to kneel down in the grass and how to be idle and blessed. How to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? The Zen teacher Kopunchina Roshi, who came over from Japan to help Suzuki Roshi start the monastery in Tassajara, said, was speaking of precepts. He said, the precepts are not to improve yourself or not to reach the highest image of your life. Precepts are Buddha's mind itself. He says, we don't use the precepts that way. The precepts are Buddha's mind itself. And he said, Zazen is the first formulation of Buddha appearing in the world. And he said, when do you recognize how rare and how precious your life is, and how it's completely your responsibility, how you manifest it, how you live it? That's such a big responsibility. And naturally, such a person sits down for a while. It's not an intended action, it's a natural action. In Dogen Senshi says of Zazen, give up practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words and following after speech, and learn the backward step that turns your light inward to illumine the self. Body and mind of themselves will drop away and your original face will be manifest. So give up practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words and following after speech, and learn the backward step that turns your light inward to illumine the self. forget the self is to be awakened by everything. This awakening continues endlessly. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, Suzuki Roshi saying that we should sit with no gaining idea. I should mention one of the great teachers of the last century in Japan, Sawaki Kodo Roshi, said, who was a great advocate of Zazen. He actually regenerated interest in Zazen as the center of Dogen Senji's practice by going around leading. He never took a temple of his own as that, but he went around all over Japan leading sashins, leading meditation retreats, and advocating Zazen. But he said, Zazen is good for nothing. And until you get it through your thick skull that Zazen is good for nothing, it's really good for nothing. So it's not for something else. We sit Zazen to sit Zazen, not for something else, not for gaining idea. So this teaching of Suzuki Roshi of no gaining idea and making your best effort on each moment forever became a koan for me. So what kind of effort do you make with no gaining idea? What kind of effort is that? And it kept. My effort had always been to be good, or to look good at least. And so, what is it with no gaining idea? And I carried that with me for a long time. And there's a poem of Dogen Senji's called Zazen Shin, in which he says, realization, neither general nor particular, is effort without desire. What is effort without desire? It's a koan which has served me well, and I offer it to you. For me, some glimmer of it came alive one spring at Tassajara. When I've been practicing probably well over 20 years, 25. And I was leading a practice period, and I was walking along the same path each day on the way to the meditation hall to offer incense to open the Zen Dome. And I noticed alongside the path, first some little green shoots coming up. And every day they were a little higher. And after a while, there was a bud that I saw on each one of these little green shoots, bunches of green shoots. And then one day I was going to the Zen Dome, and there were daffodils on all these buds. And something about that broke open my koan. What is effort without gaining idea? Something there felt responsive to that question. Those daffodils. And I remember Katakiri Roshi, when I first had Zazen instruction 35 years ago, saying, we sit to settle the self on the self and let the flower of the life force bloom. Someone once asked Suzuki Roshi, what's the most important thing? And he said, to find out what's the most important thing. And for me, this poem brings up what may, at this time, seem to me not like the most important thing. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild think this question of how we live our life, how we actually live our life, not what we think about it, not what we say about it, not what we hope about it, but how we actually live, may be the most important thing. Zen says, to expound the dharma with this body is foibles. Its virtue returns to the ocean of reality. It is unfathomable. Just accept it with respect and gratitude. How can we expound the truth with this body in how we live our life day by day? All the beings with whom we share our lives. Time now for discussion.
We still have some answers, some questions.
Yes.
Okay, so
And I will say I'm happy to do question and response, but I don't do question and answer. Because no one can actually answer.
that's fair enough.
No one can actually answer your questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Your opening premise that we're perfect as we are. I'm a public school teacher in middle school. That gets challenged every day. And it's good to be reminded that kids, you can see things clearly sometimes in a classroom, that the kid who is a bad kid, it's very easy to get caught in their negativity, and I'll treat them the way they used to be treated. It's very powerful. And to remember to step around that and find something good about that kid, because it's very powerful how we can train people to reinforce our negativity. And just to remember that there's something good, it can turn the whole thing around. But it's very hard to remember that when people are bad.
Yeah, or when people treat you bad.
Yeah.
I considered at one point teaching school, and I realized that I didn't have. I mean, at that time, I thought I needed a strong ego. Now I'm trying to dismantle it, right? But I realized I didn't have an ego that can't stand up to kids making me feel stupid every day. My hat's off to you for.
I had a mentor teacher once who taught me, find something good about each kid and make sure it's true.
Yeah.
Like, your hair looks great today, or that's a good. Don't lie.
Yeah.
They can see that. But find something, and it'll change. But that will change how they. How can you be the enemy if you just said something good to them? Part of it.
I vote for you to come back every month. Be our teacher. I'm very touched, inspired by your words. Reflecting on the part that sitting is not a task, it's natural. When you plug into the enormity and the wonder and the majesty and the mystery of life, it's so big that I had that sense of, I just need to sit down. I just need to sit down. So part of that is all of the energy in body and mind and spirit just moving. But it really felt good to hear the affirmation that sitting is just a natural response to the enormity of the gift of this life.
Well, I was just thinking this poem is a good thing for you. I was just reading that you're going to go out to Chimney Rock and commune with the wildflowers in the next couple of weeks from now. And I think, oh, it's a great time to bring up. Mary Oliver is a wonderful poet of nature. Her appreciation of nature is just pours out. Poems. But when we're feeling embarrassed as well as when we're feeling grateful, to sit down and be still and become aware of the vitality of our life through our breath, I think is very, 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 very stabilizing. Inspiring, I mean, to pay attention to breath is inspiring. It means inspire is the word for breathing in. And just to feel, sometimes when you're just sitting and being very still, you can feel your breath reaching every part of your body, and sometimes it feels like you feel the cells metabolizing almost. Just feel the aliveness that we've been given here. Yes.
On that retreat of 5 days, and the 4th day you had that realization, that immense gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have an emotional response to that sense of gratitude?
Well, yeah, it seemed like it was an emotional response. I mean, the gratitude itself was an emotional response. But it was also had a very physical feeling of opening, I think. I'm just trying to remember, did I cry?
Well, that's the question I wanted to ask, because when I have that sense of gratitude, I'll often be like sobbing, and I don't know what is that?
I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, that's the thing that occurs to me, is that very likely I cried because it's just so overwhelming. Sometimes when something is overwhelmingly wonderful, I'll cry. And I don't know, I can't say why crying is the response, but maybe it's because, I don't know, anything I say would be putting a head on top of my own, kind of, would be making some intellectual judgment of, I think it's more just the sensation of the opening of what was so closed is such a relief. Instead of trying to endure being there, I could just be there. I don't know. I agree with you that sometimes these overpowering experiences do bring tears. Wasn't there a song in the 60s about tears of joy? I think so.
How do you understand your relationship between your practice and your emotions?
Well, one of the things in practice has been for me to try to really feel what I'm feeling and understand what I'm feeling instead of pretending that I'm feeling something else, or just not even being aware of what I'm feeling. I think cultivating an awareness of my emotions helps me to live more honestly with the people around me and to look at, when they're sad, to just be willing to be sad. And until we learn how to be, sometimes we become aware of deep suffering. And if we can't be with our own suffering with some kind of gentleness and kindness and openness, it's very hard to be with others in their suffering with some kind of gentleness and kindness and openness. And of course, being with suffering is the meaning of the word compassion, with suffering. So as we are able to be with our own suffering, whatever it may be, with some kindness, we're not being selfish, we're just cultivating the possibility, or cultivating a larger capacity within ourselves to be with others in their suffering, which of course is one of the great ideals of our practice, is compassion. The wisdom to see that we and others are not separate, and the compassion to be able to be with others when they're suffering. Yes.
I just want to make an observation. The implication is to comments was that somehow the emotion is part of the problem, is part of the samsara and whatever. And I don't. My experience has been that even something like when I'm thinking about, say when I was really young and thinking about a mathematical problem or whatever, when I was experiencing intense concentration, that too was an emotion. It wasn't the same type as feeling gratitude, but it's like I could feel that the thought itself was a form of emotion in a different form than we normally think of it. And I know that it first was elucidated more clearly for me when I read what Bertrand Russell said when he did Principia Mathematica, that after that intense period of concentration, that afterwards he could never achieve that again. It was like he couldn't really feel totally that, So I think that's just, you have to, and then there's numerous instances with our teachers, like a monk dies and they cry, and someone says to them, well, why are you wailing away? It's because what they feel at the moment. It's not, you can't separate it from pure thought or anything like that.
Oh yeah, emotions, there's nothing wrong with emotions. If nothing else, emotions let us know that we're alive. No, I was just, when he asked about what did I feel, I think the gratitude itself was an emotion, but I was trying to remember if I cried, because sometimes with a strong emotion I will cry. It's not just a negative emotion that makes me cry. Sometimes I cry from happiness. I don't know about you, but sometimes I do. You're all guys, and I know that you probably were raised that, boys don't cry. It's a damn shame. But
I wonder if you could comment on what I see as the paradox in your opening statements of we don't sit to get anything, which of course is a common statement in Buddhism, and I can see how I can see it in terms of, I guess, a paradoxical statement. We sit to learn that there's no reason to sit, perhaps. But before we get to that,
I think all of us, I don't know anyone who didn't start sitting because they thought there was something wrong and missing in their lives, and maybe this would help. I think our initial impetus, for me it was my best friend suddenly died when I was 40, and she was too. And then I got ill and almost died, and I just very suddenly had this double dose of impermanence, and I was terrified. And I was looking for, how do you live a life that you know is going to end? Is again, succinctly, she says in this poem, tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Well, before that experience, death was sort of, well, sure, everything dies later. Later. It wasn't personal. But those two experiences made it very personal, and it was terrifying to me. And in the course of that, various other things happened, but in the course of it, somebody told me about the Berkeley Sendo, and I went there, and some reason it felt right. It felt like what I needed to do. Nothing rational, because I have to say that my rational mind was arguing with me every time I went there. This was the strangest thing to do. They were wearing these black robes. They were chanting in Japanese. They were sitting up in this attic, and I don't know. It was weird, and still, I got up every morning and went because something in me just felt drawn to it. And I do think I thought it was going to fix something. But what I think is pointed to by that, there's nothing to gain from Zazen. What is actually pointed to is what Suzuki was saying. There's nothing missing. You have everything you need. It's all right here. It's more to realize what's here. To realize that this very body is Buddha. And this one, and this one, and this one. But to realize is different than to get. You realize what's right here all the time. It's never been missing. But we haven't noticed it. Just like when I was going home from the hospital, realizing that my life, the rest of my life was a gift because I could have died, then I realized, well, my whole life had been a gift. And I hadn't realized it until that moment. It's that kind of thing. I mean, the life had been going on and continuing. It didn't become a gift at that moment, but I realized it was a gift at that moment, and that was tremendously freeing to realize that. But I think what's pointed to by no gaining idea is exactly that there is nothing missing. There is nothing wrong with you. You have everything you need right here, right now. And we don't generally feel like that. We don't generally, this whole, when in, the Buddha lists the kinds of things that are suffering. Not getting what you want is suffering. Well, that means you think that there's something you need out there that you have to add to this. Or getting what you don't want. Being separated from one you love. Being with someone you hate. These are all examples of suffering.
I can see it as a way to avoid getting false expectations, because if you expect something to come up because of what other people have been, I meditated and this happened, and like I did that, it didn't happen to me. Well, that was an expectation which would be too early. And having an expectation, it sets you up for failure. There's nothing to fail with sitting, because you're sitting. And what happens, and it happens to you. It doesn't happen for others. Or it might happen for you.
Well, each person's realization is particularly growing out of all of the causes and conditions of that life. Each one of us is the result of everything that's happened before now. It's like what's right there in a creek is the result of everything that's happened upstream. And at this moment, this is what is. And each one of us is like that. This is the result of everything that's happened before now in the causes and conditions of this life. And so naturally, the accumulated causes and conditions of this life, or this life, or this life, or this life, are different. And so how you realize the wholeness of this existence will be different.
also pushing things away. You talked about the Tangaryo. I mean, that just seems so austere. It seems so harsh, and I think about the precept about avoiding intoxication, and there are times when sitting really seems very purifying. It's sort of a way of rejecting things that are intoxicants, and yet to be that austere sometimes seems like a form of drunkenness in itself. It's having pushed everything away, when it then comes rushing back, when I get off the cushion, there's this sort of unbalance that happens. I'm just wondering did you see the Tangaryo experience as austere, or how are you?
Well, certainly my actions were limited, but I see it more as settling. As I say, Katakuri Roshi, when I had Zazen instructions, him says, we sit to settle the self on the self and let the flower of this life force bloom. And so I understood the Tangaryo more as settling, being willing to be right there at Tassajara, following the schedule with everyone, just settling down and not, flying out all over the place, more than cutting something off or more than austere, but just bringing my whole self to there so that I could fully experience being there. And trying to bring my mind away from all of the places that it wanted to fly off to, back to here, back to here, back to here, so that I could actually be here. So it didn't. It's hard for me to think of the practice at the monastery as being austere, because there is nothing that I've done in my life that I love as much. And yes, it is also very difficult at first and very demanding. And I can't say that I loved every minute of it. I would be lying. We have a monthly town trip where people can order up to 6 items out in town, And the amount of chocolate that's put over the road on town trip day is amazing. Or donuts, or whatever people sit and dream about with sugar in it. I don't know.
Big order of French fries.
Yeah, it's just amazing. When I was doing the town trip, the vegetable market that we used to go to get our vegetables was right next to a big donut shop, and I had all of these orders for donuts. Would you bring me back some donuts? Having had a heart attack now, I think of donuts as kind of walking heart attacks, but at the time I really liked donuts. And peanut butter. Oh, now we have peanut butter always available at the back door. We didn't used to have a back door in Tassajara, but we have this sort of snack area. And so people would order tons of peanut butter. I think that's an American thing. I don't think anybody else in the world cares about peanut butter, but boy, it's a big favorite. I don't know what to say about cutting out a lot of the things that we think we need. Makes us appreciate simpler things, I think, for one thing. It makes us appreciate what we have already. One student down in Texas who I visited recently, he now has a VW. It's a top-of-the-line VW. It's a VW, and he's very proud of himself for having gone from a Mercedes finally down to a VW, which he thinks is a really austere life. So austerity is, has different flavors for different folks. Yeah.
Okay, that's
no gaining idea.
Yeah, no gain. And it's quite a complicated proposition for a group of gay men who have heard a lot of negative stories all their lives about what their true self, aspects of their deep self. And as we spontaneously let that loveliness of our sexuality flower, it becomes another set of demands, desires, tortures, perhaps. It's easy to go too far if we just give in to kind of the flowering of the spontaneity. Like you said, there has to be some concern there. So best effort and liberation are, I guess, the questions I have. The nexus is not very well formed here. I'm concerned that it's hard to find that in this context. They're very difficult.
It may be, one of the things that I appreciated a lot in the early days I was practicing was when Trungpa Rinpoche wrote in his book, Meditation in Action, the passions are manure on the field of Bodhi. And I thought, well, that's good, because I was in a very passionate phase of my life, and I was glad they were good for something. Fertilizing awakening. But, I think that when we have some sense of being whole here, we can have a much richer relationship with others than when we're trying to complete ourselves through getting something from another that we think will make us whole. I think if we enter a relationship as a whole person with another whole person, it's likely to be much more rewarding for both people.
Thank you. That was a good one. That was and do we have any announcement? I know we have a host.
Sorry, I'm still reflecting. I'm the host. My name is Jim. There'll be some refreshments out there, and we can enjoy a few minutes of talking, a social hour afterwards. Please also remember there's a Donna Bowl, and we have a suggested contribution. If you can make it up to $5, that would be lovely. If you have space to make a little more, that's even wonderful. If that's strained for you, do what's appropriate. I also just encourage those who want to meet and have lunch afterwards. There's often a group who will be around if you linger and find them. And new faces are welcome to talk to me or any of the others.
Yes.
On May 1st, it's going to be a potluck at my house. And so everyone's got some flyers up there. And
Thank you. Yes.
Today is newsletter mailing day. It's hard to believe that bi-monthly time is rolled around. So once you guys can help afterwards, make short work of folding, stapling, labeling, stamping. That would be great.
That's great. Yes.
Yeah, I'll put in a plug for this play. I'm in Berkeley, The Miser, Chapter of the Players. It's gotten rave reviews, and they're trying a new policy of making free admission to all the productions this year to make it really accessible to everybody. They collect donations afterwards. And it's running Thursday through Sunday nights now through May 2nd. So it's a pretty lively show.
What is the play?
It's called The Miser by Molière. And it's really goofy, silly, Looney Tunes stuff. Hardly anything cerebral about it. So you might enjoy it.
All right. Thank you very much. Blanche, I want to say thank you very much.
You're welcome. I wonder if we could close with this dedication of merit that's on
Well, one very quick announcement. As Blanche mentioned, there's going to be a wildflower hike. I think it's on the 24th. It's the 24th, 25th. It's a Saturday of weekend. And it's our annual Point Reyes Chimney Rock potluck picnic wildflower hike. So it's going to be described in the newsletter, details and so on. But
When is it going to be?
When's it going to be?
Yeah.
Well, it's either 24th or 25th. I forget which Saturday.
I believe it's 24th.
April.
This month, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we do it every year. We've been doing it for years and years. It's a tradition, and people have a lot of fun.
Let's get the circle. We close the circle. You can read the dedication.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.